The neon glow of the city lights flickered on Keanu Reeves' windshield as his sleek, deep red Ferrari purred down a dimly lit road. It was past midnight, the streets mostly empty, when suddenly, a sharp jolt. The car sputtered, the engine stuttered, and within seconds the powerful machine that had carried him through countless highways died in the middle of nowhere. Keanu frowned, shifting in his seat. This wasn't supposed to happen. His cars were always in top condition, checked by the best mechanics in the city. But now, here he was, stranded. He exhaled, stepping out onto the pavement. The cool night air carried the faint smell of gasoline, and in the silence, he could hear the distant hum of traffic from the main road. His eyes scanned the street. No flashy garages, no high-end repair shops. Just an old, run-down auto shop on the corner, its neon sign flickering weakly. Carter's Auto Repair. It looked abandoned, the kind of place no one noticed anymore. Keanu had two choices: wait hours for a tow truck or take a chance on this forgotten shop. With a slight smirk, he made his decision. He pushed the heavy garage door open, the rusted hinges groaning in protest. Inside, under the dim glow of a single flickering bulb, an old man was hunched over an engine, his calloused hands working with slow, practiced precision. The man didn't look up. Got trouble? His voice was rough, carrying the weight of years spent fixing what others discarded. Keanu ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, my car's out front. Just died on me." The old man, Henry Carter, finally looked up, squinting at him. For a second, there was no recognition, just another customer, another broken machine. Then, with a grunt, he wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag and grabbed his toolbox. "Too much luxury," Henry muttered as he stepped outside. "Machines these days ain't built to last. Let's see what we got." Keanu followed, watching as Henry popped open the hood and leaned in, his fingers moving like a surgeon's, feeling, listening. There was something different about him. No computers, no diagnostic tools, just raw experience. A few minutes passed in silence before Henry exhaled. "I can fix it. Give me a few." Keanu crossed his arms. "You always work alone?" Henry didn't look up. "Always have. People these days don't fix things. They just replace them." Keanu nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the old man. Something about Henry, it stuck with him, but he didn't know why. Not yet. A sharp cough broke the silence. Henry's hand briefly went to his chest, his fingers pressing against the fabric of his shirt. It was quick, almost unnoticeable. Almost. Keanu saw it. "You good?" Henry waved him off. "Just tired. Been a long day." Keanu wasn't convinced. There was more to it. But before he could press, Henry tightened one last bolt, wiped his hands, and took a step back. "Try it now." Keanu slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life, smooth as ever. He looked up, impressed. "That was fast." Henry just shrugged. "Like I said, people don't fix things anymore. I do." Keanu reached for his wallet, but Henry shook his head. "Nah, easy job. Just come back if she gives you trouble again." That was the first time Keanu Reeves met Henry Carter. He had no idea that a week later he'd return, and what he'd find would shake him to his core. A week had passed, but something about that old mechanic lingered in Keanu's mind. It wasn't just the way Henry fixed the car, fast, precise, like a man who had spent his whole life with machines. It was the way he refused payment, the way he worked alone in that forgotten shop, the way his hand had briefly clutched his chest. It was nothing. Or maybe it was something. Tonight, curiosity pulled Keanu back. He didn't need another repair. His Ferrari had been running like a dream. But as he turned the corner onto that same dimly lit street, something felt off. The neon sign of Carter's Auto Repair was dark. The garage doors, once slightly open, were locked shut. No faint hum of an engine, no sound of tools clanking against metal, just silence. Keanu parked, stepped out, and approached the shop. He knocked once. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. He tried the handle, locked. A strange unease settled in his chest. Something wasn't right. Across the street, a flicker of movement caught his eye. An older man dressed in a faded flannel shirt was standing outside a laundromat, watching him. Their eyes met, and the man hesitated before finally speaking. "You looking for Henry?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, he fixed my car last week. Thought I'd stop by." The man sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Figured you'd come back. He ain't here, kid." Keanu's stomach tensed. "Where is he?" The man, Bill, paused before answering. "Hospital. Found him collapsed in the garage a couple days ago. Heart gave out while he was working." Keanu felt the words hit like a gut punch. He had seen it, Henry rubbing his chest, brushing it off like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. "Which hospital?" Keanu's voice was steady, but inside something was shifting. Bill studied him for a second, then sighed. "County General, room 317. But listen, Henry's a stubborn old bastard. He ain't the type to take help from anyone, especially a guy like you." Keanu's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." Without another word, he turned back to his Ferrari and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was on Henry. He had planned to stop by and say thanks. But now, things had changed. Now he was going to make sure that the man who had spent his life fixing things wouldn't be left broken himself. The drive to County General felt longer than it should have. Keanu wasn't used to this feeling, this tightness in his chest, this urgency gnawing at his thoughts. He barely knew the man, and yet something about Henry Carter made it impossible to just walk away. When he pulled into the hospital parking lot, the usual flood of flashing cameras and eager fans was absent. No one here cared who he was. Here, he was just another visitor, just another person walking through the cold, antiseptic-smelling hallways under the dull hum of fluorescent lights. At the front desk, a tired-looking nurse barely glanced up as he approached. "I'm looking for Henry Carter, room 317. She typed into her computer, nodded. "Down the hall, 3rd floor. He's stable, but don't expect him to be too talkative." Keanu gave a polite nod and made his way to the elevator, pressing the button for the 3rd floor. The doors slid shut, and as the lift ascended, he exhaled slowly, preparing himself for whatever he was about to walk into. The hallway smelled of medicine and old coffee. Room 317 was at the end, its door slightly ajar. Keanu stepped inside. Henry Carter lay in bed, pale against the stark white sheets. Wires ran from his chest to a heart monitor, its steady beeping the only sound in the room. His face looked different. The tough, grease-streaked mechanic who had stood strong against time now looked smaller, like the years had finally caught up to him. For a long moment, Keanu just stood there, watching the man who had refused his money, who had insisted on working alone, who had coughed and brushed it off like it was nothing. And now, here he was. Then Henry's eyes flickered open. He blinked once, twice, before his gaze focused on Keanu. And instead of surprise, the first thing out of his mouth was a low, raspy mutter. "Damn, don't tell me your car broke down again." Keanu let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "Still running like a dream?" Henry grunted. "Then what the hell are you doing here?" Keanu pulled up a chair, resting his arms on his knees. "You fixed my car. Figured it's only fair I check on the guy who keeps things running." Henry smirked, but there was exhaustion behind it. "Kid, I don't need checking on. I just need to get the hell out of this place." Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, his eyes moved to the heart monitor, the IV, the faint tremor in Henry's hands. This wasn't just a bad week. This was something deeper, something Henry had probably ignored for years. Finally, Keanu spoke. "Let me help." Henry's smirk faded. "Help? With the hospital bills, with the shop, whatever you need." Henry's expression darkened. "I don't take charity, kid." Keanu leaned back, studying the man, stubborn, proud. The kind of guy who had spent his whole life standing on his own 2 feet and wasn't about to change that now. After a long pause, Keanu nodded slowly. Fine. He wouldn't argue. Not yet. But as he sat there watching the old mechanic stare out the window like a man who had no intention of asking for help, an idea was already forming in his mind. Because if Henry Carter wouldn't take charity, then Keanu would have to find another way. The next morning, Keanu sat in his kitchen, a cup of black coffee growing cold beside him as he stared at his laptop screen. The search bar blinked. Waiting. He typed, Carter's Auto Repair, Los Angeles. A single, outdated website appeared. No flashy design, no marketing, just a name, a phone number, and a simple tagline, honest work since 1974. Keanu clicked through. A few grainy photos showed a younger Henry standing outside his shop, wrench in hand, his face tough but proud. He scrolled further. That's when he saw something unexpected. Forum posts, customer stories. One caught his eye. I was broke when my car died on the freeway. Henry fixed it for free. Told me to pay when I could. I never forgot that. Another. My dad trusted Henry with every car he ever owned. When he passed, Henry fixed his old Chevy just so we could drive it to his funeral. He wouldn't take a dime. Keanu exhaled, gripping his coffee mug. Henry Carter wasn't just a mechanic. He was a man who had spent his life quietly helping people. And now, when he needed help, there was no one left to fight for him. But that was about to change. He picked up his phone and made a call. Hey, it's Keanu. I need a favor. 2 days later, Henry was still in that hospital bed when the door swung open and Keanu Reeves walked in, hands in his pockets. Henry gave him a tired glance. You again? Thought movie stars had better things to do. Keanu smirked. Turns out, I had some free time. Henry shook his head but didn't argue. Keanu pulled up a chair. You ever think about what happens when you're not around anymore? Henry's smirk faded. You asking if I got a will? Because if you're hoping to inherit my shop, you're about 30 years too late. Keanu leaned forward. I'm asking if you want your shop to die with you. Silence. For the first time, Henry's eyes held something different. Hesitation. Carter's Auto Repair doesn't have to close, Henry, Keanu continued. You spent your life fixing things. What if I told you, I want to fix something for you? Henry let out a dry chuckle. Kid, I told you, I don't take handouts. Keanu nodded. Good, because I'm not giving you one. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a folded piece of paper onto Henry's tray. Henry frowned, picked it up, and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words. Slowly, his expression changed. He looked up at Keanu. What the hell is this? Keanu leaned back. It's your shop. Expanded, renovated, and turned into something bigger than just a repair garage. Henry's grip tightened on the paper. You want to turn my place into some corporate sellout shop? No thanks. Keanu shook his head. Not corporate. A school, a training ground, a place where young mechanics, real mechanics, can learn from guys like you. Henry's jaw tightened. Keanu continued. You said it yourself. Nobody fixes things anymore. But what if you could teach them? What if you could make sure your way of doing things doesn't disappear? Silence stretched between them. For the first time, Henry looked uncertain. Finally, he exhaled, shaking his head. You're insane. Keanu smirked. Probably, but you're interested. Henry didn't answer, but Keanu could see it, the gears turning in his mind, the fight between his pride and the undeniable truth. Because for the first time, someone wasn't offering him charity. They were offering him a legacy. And that was something Henry Carter just might consider. 3 weeks later, Henry Carter stepped out of a cab and stared at his shop, or at least what used to be his shop. Carter's Auto Repair had always been small, worn, held together more by trust than by fresh paint or fancy tools. But now, it was different. The same old brick wall stood, but the faded sign was gone, replaced with bold, new lettering. Carter's Auto and Technical Garage. The sound of hammers and drills echoed from inside. A fresh coat of paint covered the exterior, and parked out front weren't just broken-down cars, but a line of young mechanics, kids in work boots and grease-streaked hands, all watching in anticipation. Henry frowned. "What the hell is this?" From the side a familiar voice spoke. "It's the start of something new." Henry turned. Keanu stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. Henry exhaled. "Kid, I don't remember saying yes to this." Keanu smirked. "You never said no either." Henry ran a hand over his face, sighing. "I should have known you'd pull something like this." Keanu shrugged. "I told you, I don't give handouts. This is yours, Henry, your shop, your way of doing things. I just made sure it wouldn't die with you." Henry's gaze swept over the scene. He saw young men and women standing by the open garage, eager but unsure, waiting for something. He saw his old workbench still there, but cleaner. He saw new tools, fresh equipment, everything exactly as he would have wanted it. And for the first time in a long time, he saw a future. Henry let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "You're crazy," Keanu chuckled. "Probably." Henry glanced back at the kids, then at the shop, then finally at Keanu. There was something unreadable in his eyes, frustration maybe, but something else too. A pause. Then, with a resigned sigh, Henry took a slow step toward the garage. The young mechanics straightened up. One of them, barely 20, nervously held up a wrench. Sir, can you show me how to—" Henry snatched the wrench from his hands. "If you're gonna fix a car, at least hold the damn tool like you mean it." The kid gulped, nodding quickly. Keanu watched as Henry Carter stepped into his shop like he'd never left. Within minutes, he was barking instructions, rolling up his sleeves, moving like a man who had been doing this for 50 years. Because he had. Keanu leaned against his car, watching. He had done what he came to do. Henry Carter wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a teacher, a mentor, a legacy. And this was only the beginning. The days turned into weeks, and before Henry even realized it, Carter's Auto and Technical Garage had become something he never imagined. A place alive with purpose. Young mechanics filled the shop, eager hands learning the weight of a real wrench, the feel of an engine, the difference between fixing and just replacing. They weren't just watching Henry work, they were becoming him. And somehow, Henry didn't hate it. He still grumbled, still muttered about damn kids who don't know a carburetor from a coffee machine, still waved people off when they thanked him. But deep down he knew Keanu had been right. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Los Angeles, Henry wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against his old workbench, watching the garage buzz with activity. Keanu was there too, standing near the entrance, arms crossed, watching quietly. Henry scoffed. "You keep showing up, people are going to start thinking you work here." Keanu smirked. "Maybe I do." Henry snorted, shaking his head. He glanced at the new sign above the garage, the one he had fought against at first, the one that now bore his name, Carter's Auto and Technical Garage, since 1974, because some things deserve to be done right. For a long moment, Henry just stared at it. Then, in a rare moment of honesty, he muttered, "Guess I owe you one, my kid." Keanu smirked. "Nah, you already paid me back." Henry frowned. "How the hell did I do that?" Keanu nodded toward the garage, where a group of young mechanics listened intently to an older man in grease-streaked coveralls, hanging onto every word. By proving that the right way is still worth teaching. Henry looked at them, then back at Keanu. And for the first time in a long, long time, he felt proud. That night, as Henry locked up the shop, he paused for a moment, taking it all in. The tools, the machines, the people. His life's work, no longer just his own. Keanu Reeves had given him something money never could, a future, a legacy. And for the first time, Henry Carter finally understood some things aren't just worth fixing, some things are worth passing on.